In this book, I share with you my own conception of critical hope. However, the notion of critical hope can be traced to Brazilian educator, scholar, and activist Paulo Freire. Freire believed that the goal of education was to transform society and build more equitable systems of governance, education, and social relations. His writings, and indeed his professional life, were endeavors that embraced the politics of education, culture, and equality, or lack thereof. Paulo Freire's career involved abundant traveling and several relocations. As a result of a military coup in Brazil in 1964, he went into exile in Bolivia and eventually moved on to Chile, where he worked for UNESCO and wrote the book that would make him famous, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. What made Pedagogy of the Oppressed so internationally recognized was arguably the love and humility he conveyed toward those who he identified as oppressed, those living in poverty and those marginalized for reasons of race, class, and the like. Rather than romanticizing or fetishizing the oppressed, however, he upheld their lived experiences as valid forms of knowledge and expertise. The common sense that is built through adversity and work and living in the world, informal modes of education, he believed, is just as valid and valuable as the expertise derived through books, formal education, and degrees. He saw education as an act of liberation, a way for all people, regardless of socioeconomic status, to develop a critical consciousness in which they could identify broken or inequitable systems and work to transform them. He called upon those who occupied positions of privilege to struggle in solidarity with the oppressed and to use their own resources to help the cause. Because of Freire's origins in education, and because of my own origins in education, this book has an undeniable orientation in the world of teaching and learning. But I will speak repeatedly throughout this book of leaders and changemakers because I believe that whether you are a parent, a CEO, a healthcare worker, an entrepreneur, an entertainer, or a service worker, you have spheres in your life in which you are a leader and a change maker. You have spheres wherein people listen to you, and you carry influence, and where people will notice whether you model the ethics and values that you espouse, and where you teach others, either formally or informally, through your own actions. This is what it is to be an educator, too. Leaders and changemakers are all around us, and they are, at their core, educators and facilitators of learning. Because of the ubiquity of learning in society at large, leaders and changemakers everywhere are in a position to be arbiters of critical hope. Before I take creative and intellectual liberties with the notion of critical hope in the coming chapters of this book, I will offer here a simplified overview of how Freire viewed critical hope. He believed critical hope was an act of witnessing, often witnessing injustices, oppression, and tragedy. The practice of moral imagination that encourages leaders to envision a society with greater dignity, freedom, and justice. A celebration of human agency and capacity to enact change. The freedom to participate both individually and collectively in shaping the institutions that affect our lives. Something anchored in practice and historical concreteness, that is, real, material, and lived realities that stem from history.